This billionaire was about to destroy a neighborhood until he accidentally became its gardener. If panic had a sound, it would be the ringtone of Julian Sterling's third iPhone. Not the work phone, and certainly not the personal one he hadn't touched in months, but the crisis line. The one that only screamed when something was burning down. And right now, in the backseat of a climate-controlled Maybach crawling through the gridlock of Chicago traffic, Julian felt like he was the one on fire. He was 32 years old, the CEO of Urban Space, and his net worth was large enough to buy the traffic jam he was sitting in and fire every single driver. Yet, ironically, he couldn't buy a single second of peace. Across from him on the jump seat, his assistant Greg, a 20-something with the haunted eyes of a combat veteran, was reading from a tablet with trembling hands. "The hashtags are trending, sir," Greg whispered, as if speaking too loudly might shatter Julian's fragile composure. "Eat the rich is #1, Sterling is the devil is #2, and someone made a meme of you as the shark from Jaws eating a grandmother's bakery." Julian stared out the tinted window at the gray sky. "Is it a great white or a hammerhead, Greg? Details matter." Greg didn't answer. He just looked like he might cry. Julian loosened his tie. It was Italian silk, a shade of blue that his stylist called trustworthy azure, but right now it felt like a noose. The air conditioning was set to a perfect 68 degrees, yet he was suffocating. The windows were tinted so dark the world outside looked like a bruise. He felt the eyes of the city on him, judging him, hating him, waiting for him to announce the demolition of yet another beloved neighborhood block to make room for a luxury yoga studio. "Stop the car," Julian said. His voice was quiet, dry as dust. Greg blinked. "Sir, we're in the middle of an intersection. The crisis meeting with the board is in 20 minutes. If we're late," I said, "stop the damn car." The driver, trained to obey commands instantly, slammed on the brakes. Before the vehicle had even fully settled on its shocks, Julian Sterling opened the door. He didn't wait for security. He didn't check his schedule. He stepped out into the humid, exhaust-filled air of a Chicago summer, leaving the safety of his billions behind. "Sir, your jacket, your security detail." Greg screamed from the open door. Julian didn't look back. He just walked. He dodged a bicycle courier who flipped him off. He sidestepped a puddle of questionable brown liquid that splashed onto his handcrafted loafers. He walked until the gleaming glass skyscrapers of the Loop faded into the brick-and-mortar grit of the West Side. He walked until the noise of his life, the shareholders, the lawyers, the protesters, finally began to fade. He walked until his pristine white shirt was sticking to his back and his lungs burned with the effort. He found himself standing in front of a chain-link fence on a street he couldn't name. But behind the rust and the no trespassing signs, there was an explosion of green. Sunflowers the size of satellite dishes nodded in the breeze. Vines climbed up crumbling brick walls like green veins, holding the old architecture together. A hand-painted wooden sign hung crookedly on the gate, the 4th Street Community Garden. Grow what you own. Julian stared at it. It was messy, it was chaotic, it was completely undesigned, and it was the most beautiful thing he had seen in 10 years. "Oxygen," he whispered. "Actual oxygen." He needed to get in. He needed to sit on a bench that wasn't ergonomic and stare at a plant that hadn't been placed there by an interior designer. He tried the gate. Locked. Of course. He looked around. The street was empty. Well, if the internet thought he was a shark, he might as well act like a predator. He grabbed the chain-link fence. The cold metal bit into his soft, manicured hands. He hoisted himself up, swinging a leg over the top. His suit pants, tailored in Milan to fit within a millimeter of perfection, groaned in protest. Re-yip. Julian froze at the top of the fence, straddling the metal bar. He looked down. A jagged piece of wire had just introduced itself to his inner thigh, leaving a 3-inch tear in the fabric. He sighed, looking up at the smoggy sky. Perfect. Just perfect. He dropped down onto the other side, landing in a patch of soft, damp mulch. He dusted off his knees, checked the rip definitely visible, and took a deep breath. The air here smelled different. It smelled of basil, damp earth, rotting wood, and peppermint. You know, a sharp female voice cut through the silence. Usually when people break in here, they are stealing copper wire. You look like you're here to steal. What? My patience. Julian spun around. Standing by a raised bed of kale, holding a clipboard like a weapon of war, was a woman. She was small, but she had the posture of a heavyweight boxer. She wore oversized denim overalls covered in paint and mud, a white tank top, and a red bandana tying back a riot of dark curls. This was Maya. And if Julian was the shark, she was the harpoon. I wasn't breaking in, Julian stammered, his usual boardroom confidence evaporating. I was climbing in, there's a distinction. Maya narrowed her eyes, scanning him from his messy hair down to his feet. Nice shoes. What are those? Italian leather. Prada, actually. Great. They'll make excellent compost. You're late. Julian blinked. Sweat was dripping down his neck now. He expected her to recognize him. He expected her to pull out a phone and start live streaming Billionaire Julian Sterling caught trespassing. He braced himself for the camera flash, but she didn't take out a phone. She tapped her clipboard with a pen. I said you're late, she repeated, her voice leaving no room for argument. She checked a battered Casio watch on her wrist. The court order said 2:00 p.m. It is now 2:17. That's 17 minutes you owe me at the end of the shift. Name. Julian echoed stupidly. Yes, name, unless you want me to mark you as a no-show and call your parole officer. I don't have time for games, rich boy. I have 3 tons of topsoil coming in an hour, and you're the only pair of hands the state sent me today. Julian's brain, usually capable of processing billion-dollar mergers in seconds, ground to a halt. Parole officer, court order. She thought he was a criminal. She thought he was the community service guy. Tell her, his logical brain screamed. Tell her you're Julian Sterling. Tell her you own the company that probably holds the mortgage on this lot. But he looked at her. Her eyes were fierce, tired, and completely unimpressed. She wasn't looking at him like he was a wallet. She wasn't looking at him like he was a monster. She was looking at him like he was labor. Just a guy with 2 hands. For the first time in his life, Julian Sterling didn't want to be special. He just wanted to be invisible. Jay, he lied. My name is Jay. Okay, Jay, she said, scribbling on the clipboard. Last name, Sterling. Son, Sterlingson, Jay Sterlingson. He mentally kicked himself. Jay Sterlingson. He was a genius innovator, a titan of industry, and that was the best alias he could come up with. Maya raised an eyebrow. Sterlingson. Sounds fake, but I don't get paid enough to investigate. Okay, Jay Sterlingson. Welcome to the 4th Street Garden. Rule number 1, don't step on the seedlings. Rule number 2, if you find a needle, call me, don't touch it. Rule number 3, you work, you eat. You don't work, you get out. She walked toward him, encroaching on his personal space. She smelled like rosemary and sweat. It was intoxicatingly real. She reached out and grabbed the lapel of his ruined suit jacket. And rule number 4, she said, tugging on the silk. Lose the jacket. You look like you're going to a funeral for a hedge fund. It's a very expensive jacket, Julian protested weakly. Well, now it's a very expensive rag. Take it off. You can't shovel manure in a blazer, Jay. Shovel manure, the words echoed in Julian's head. Wait, shovel what now? Manure, cow poop, the good stuff. Unless your court order says light dusting only, let me check. She feigned checking the paper. Nope. Says general labor. That means poop, strip. Julian hesitated. He looked back at the fence. He could just climb back over. He could call Greg. Greg would bring the car around. He could go back to the air conditioning, back to the board meeting, back to being the shark. He looked at Maya. She was tapping her foot, impatient. A butterfly, an actual monarch butterfly, landed on her shoulder. She didn't even notice. He took off the jacket. Okay, fine, where's the shovel? Smirking, Maya said, turning on her heel. Follow me, convict, try to keep up. She turned and marched down the narrow path between the tomato plants. Julian stood there for a second, holding his jacket like a dead animal. He draped it over a scarecrow that was dressed better than he was at this point. He rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt. He loosened his tie until it hung completely open. He took a deep breath of the humid, earthy air. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. I have a company to run. But as he watched Maya disappear into the greenery, her ponytail swinging with determination, Julian felt a strange sensation in his chest. The panic was gone. The noise was gone. For the next 4 hours, he wasn't Julian Sterling, the destroyer of neighborhoods. He was Jay, the guy who was late, and for some terrified, exhilarated reason. He couldn't wait to see what happened next. He started walking down the path. Hey, wait up, do you have? You have gloves. These hands are insured. Insurance doesn't cover calluses, princess. Build some character. She shouted back without turning around. Julian looked at his soft, manicured palms. Character, he muttered. Right. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from physical labor. It's not the headache you get from staring at a spreadsheet for 12 hours. It's not the tightness in your chest from firing a VP. It is a full-body vibration. It is your muscles screaming in a language you haven't spoken since high school gym class. Julian Sterling was fluent in spreadsheet headaches, but right now, trying to move a pile of compost from point A to point B, he was realizing his body was essentially decorative. He was waist-deep in a pile of dark, rich soil. His white shirt was no longer white. It was brown, gray, and transparent with sweat. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, was sticking up in every direction like a mad scientist's. You're holding it wrong, Maya said. She was leaning against her shovel, looking completely fresh, as if she hadn't just moved twice the amount of dirt he had. I'm holding the stick part, Julian gasped, clutching the handle for dear life. It's a handle, Jay, and you're using all back, no legs. You keep lifting like that, you're going to blow a disc. And I don't have liability insurance for white-collar crimes against ergonomics. She stepped in. She didn't ask for permission. She moved into his space, her hands grabbing his elbows, correcting his posture. Bend your knees, fulcrum. The shovel is a lever, physics. Didn't they teach you physics at whatever fancy private school you got kicked out of? I went to Wharton, Julian said automatically. Then he caught himself. Wait, no, I mean Walton. Walton High. Public school, very gritty. Sure, okay, Walton High, watch me. She took the shovel from his trembling hands. Maya weighed maybe 120 pounds soaking wet, but she drove the blade into the pile with a fluid, violent grace. Crunch, scoop, twist, throw. It was a dance, a brutal, efficient dance. See, you don't fight the dirt, you work with it. Try again. She handed the tool back. The wood was warm from her hands. Julian gripped it. He bent his knees. He dug in. He threw the dirt. It was better, not good, but better. So, what is this for? Why are we moving this pile 3 feet to the left? We're amending the soil, Maya said, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. This used to be a parking lot, Jay. The ground underneath is dead. Packed clay, rubble, oil spills. If we want to grow anything that doesn't taste like gasoline, we have to build new earth on top of it, layer by layer. Julian paused. He looked at the ground, a parking lot. His company, Urban Space, specialized in buying parking lots and turning them into luxury condos. He had never once thought about what was under the asphalt. To him, land was just square footage. To her, it was something that could be dead or alive. You're resurrecting it, he said. Maya looked at him, surprised by the word choice. Yeah, I guess I am. It's called remediation. It takes time. Nature is patient, but she needs help. She narrowed her eyes at him again. You talk pretty fancy for a guy doing time for. What was it again? I'm guessing tax evasion or insider trading. You have finance bro written all over your forehead. Julian froze. He panicked. Think, Julian, think of a crime. Piracy, he blurted out. Maya blinked. Piracy like on a boat with a sword. No, digital piracy. I downloaded a car, I mean movies, illegal movies. A lot of them. I'm a very dangerous man in the torrenting community. Maya stared at him for a long, agonizing second. Then a snort escaped her nose, then a laugh. A real, loud, unladylike laugh that made the sunflowers seem to lean in to listen. You downloaded a car. Okay, Blackbeard, keep digging. Those tomatoes aren't going to feed themselves. They worked in silence for a while. The sun began to dip, casting long, golden shadows across the garden. Frantic buzzing of Julian's brain had quieted to a low hum. There was just the rhythm. Dig, lift, throw. For the first time in years, Julian felt useful, not powerful, just useful. He looked at the pile he had moved. It was a tangible thing. He had done that. He hadn't delegated it. He hadn't merged it. He had moved it with his own 2 hands. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The spell broke. Julian's pocket vibrated, then again, and again. He instinctively reached for it, pulling out the sleek black iPhone. The screen lit up. 47 missed calls Greg. 12 missed calls Board of Directors. Hey. Before Julian could answer the text, a hand snatched the phone away. Maya stood there holding his device like it was a piece of radioactive waste. Hey, give that back. That's my life in there. Rule number 5, Jay. No screens in the dirt. You're here to disconnect. Whatever piracy business you have going on can wait. You don't understand. I have people waiting on me. Yeah. Well, these radishes are waiting on you too. And unlike your internet friends, the radishes will actually die without you. She didn't hand it back. She walked over to a wooden tool shed, opened a drawer, and dropped the phone inside. She locked it with a satisfying click. You get it back at 6:00 p.m., end of shift. Now wash up. It's break time. I can't just wash up. Julian looked at the locked drawer. He felt a spike of adrenaline. He could sue her. He could buy this shed and burn it down. He could. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He walked to the hose. 5 minutes later, they were sitting on a bench made of old shipping pallets. Maya opened a brown paper bag. She pulled out a Tupperware container and a loaf of bread wrapped in a cloth. You hungry? I usually just have a protein shake at 4:00, Julian said. God, you are tragic. Here. She sliced a thick piece of sourdough bread with a pocket knife. She took a tomato, a massive, ugly, lumpy red thing that looked nothing like the perfect spheres in the supermarket, and sliced it thick. She slapped it on the bread, sprinkled some sea salt from a tiny tin, and handed it to him. Eat. We grew the tomato right there. Bed number 4. Baked the bread this morning. Julian took the sandwich. It looked messy. The juice was already soaking into the bread. He took a bite. The flavor exploded in his mouth. Acidity, sweetness, the crunch of the salt, the chew of the sourdough. It was violent in its freshness. Julian stopped chewing. His eyes widened. He had eaten at Michelin-star restaurants in Paris. He had eaten sushi flown in from Tokyo on a private jet. This was better. Oh my God, he whispered. Yeah, that's the taste of not poisoning the earth. Good, right? Maya smirked, biting into her own sandwich. It tastes real. It tastes like a tomato that actually had a life. It's an heirloom, Cherokee purple. You can't buy these at Whole Foods, Jay. They bruise too easy. They don't ship well. They're too fragile for the supply chain. She looked at the garden, her face softening. That's the problem with the world today. Everyone wants things that are uniform, bulletproof, and shelf-stable. But the good stuff, the real stuff, it's messy. It bruises. Julian looked at her. She had a smudge of dirt on her cheek. Her hair was a disaster. She was eating a tomato sandwich with dirty hands. She was messy. She was definitely not shelf-stable. And Julian Sterling, the man who built an empire on glass and steel and uniformity, felt a crack in his armor. So you run this place alone. Mostly. We have volunteers. The neighborhood helps. But it's a fight. Every day is a fight. Against who? She gestured vaguely toward the skyline, toward the gleaming towers of downtown. Against them. The suits. The developers. There's this company, Urban Space. Have you heard of them? Julian choked on his bread. He coughed violently. Urban Space. Never heard of them. Sounds terrible. They're vultures. They buy up lots like this. places that actually mean something to the community, and they turn them into mixed-use luxury experiences. Do you know what a mixed-use luxury experience is, Jay? I have a vague idea. It's a coffee shop that charges $8 for a latte underneath an apartment that costs $4,000 a month where no one actually talks to their neighbors. They're trying to buy this block. They've been circling for months. She clenched her fist, crushing a piece of bread crust. But I won't let them have it. This is sacred ground. My grandmother started this garden. I'd chain myself to the gate before I let Julian Sterling put a yoga studio here. Julian swallowed hard. The tomato suddenly tasted a little acidic. Julian Sterling, you don't like him. Like him, I despise him. He's everything wrong with this country. He's a hollow man in an empty suit. I bet he's never touched dirt in his life. I bet he thinks milk comes from a carton and dignity comes from a bank account. Julian looked down at his hands. They were covered in dirt. There was a blister forming on his thumb. His fingernails were black with soil. Maybe he just doesn't know any better. Maya looked at him, her eyes intense. Ignorance is a choice when you have that much money, Jay. He chooses not to see us. That makes him worse than ignorant. It makes him cruel. She stood up, dusting crumbs off her overalls. Anyway, break's over. You owe me 17 minutes, remember? Let's go mulch the peppers. She walked away, back into the green jungle. Julian sat there for a moment longer. He looked at the skyscraper in the distance, his building. He could see the sun glinting off the penthouse windows. He was the villain of this story. He was the vulture. But as he looked at his dirty hands, he realized something terrifying. He didn't want to go back to the tower. He wanted to finish mulching the peppers. He wanted to earn the 17 minutes. He stood up, leaving the billionaire behind on the bench, and followed her. "Hey, wait up," he called out. "Which ones are the peppers, the green ones?" "Oh my God, Jay," Maya sighed. "We have so much work to do." Julian Sterling led a double life. By day, or at least from the hours of 8:00 a.m. to 1:00 p.m., he was the master of the universe. He wore suits that cost more than the average sedan. He sat at the head of a mahogany table in a glass tower, nodding gravely as people used words like synergy, scalability, and liquidation. He signed documents that moved millions of dollars with the stroke of a Montblanc pen, but at 1:30 p.m. the master of the universe vanished. He would slip into the executive bathroom, lock the door, and change. Off went the Italian silk. On came a pair of stiff, dark work pants he had bought at a surplus store and a t-shirt that was already beginning to stain with permanent sweat marks. He would mess up his hair, splash some water on his face to wash away the corporate polish, and sneak out the service elevator like a fugitive. He told his assistant, Greg, that he was undergoing intensive eccentric therapy. Greg, who was too terrified to ask questions, just nodded and rescheduled his afternoon calls. Now, 2 weeks after his first escape, Julian stood in the middle of the 4th Street garden, staring at a pile of garbage. Literally garbage. There were old car tires, wooden pallets with rusty nails, and a bathtub that had seen better decades. "Today," Meyer announced, clapping her hands together, "we are building furniture." Julian looked at the pile, then at Maya. She was wearing a t-shirt that said compost. "It's a dirty job, but someone has to do it." "I think you're confusing the word building with scavenging," Julian said. "Jay Sterlingson is a man of many talents, but alchemy isn't one of them. You can't turn a tire into a chair." "Watch me," Maya challenged. She handed him a reciprocating saw. It was heavy, loud, and looked like it could take a finger off if he sneezed wrong. "We need planters for the new squash bed," she explained. "We don't have budget for those fancy ceramic pots you see in magazines. So, use these tires. You cut the rim off, flip it inside out, paint it, and boom, planter." Julian weighed the saw in his hand. "Why?" he asked. Maya paused, wiping grease off her cheek. "Why what? Why not just buy new ones? I mean, I know funds are tight, but the time it takes to fix this junk. Surely your time is worth more than a $10 plastic pot." It was the economist in him speaking, the efficiency expert. In Julian's world, if something was broken, you threw it away. If a company was failing, you dissolved it. If a relationship was difficult, you ended it. Repairing things was inefficient. Maya looked at him, her expression shifting from playful to serious. She walked over to a wooden pallet that was missing 2 slats. She ran her hand over the rough, splintered wood. "You rich people are all the same," she said, not unkindly but with a weary edge. "You think new means better. You think that if something has a crack in it, it's useless." "I didn't say useless," Julian defended. "I said inefficient." "Inefficient," she repeated, tasting the word like it was sour milk. "Jay, look at this pallet. It probably traveled across the ocean. It carried food or medicine or engine parts. It has scars. It has history. If I buy a plastic pot from a big box store, it has no soul. It's just petrochemicals and cheap labor." She picked up a hammer and handed it to him. "Here, we believe in kintsugi. You know what that is?" Julian nodded slowly. "The Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold lacquer." "Exactly." Maya smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made Julian forget about his quarterly earnings report. "We don't have gold, obviously, but we have sweat. We take things that the world threw away, tires, pallets, people, and we give them a second life. We heal them. And usually the healed version is stronger than the original." She pointed to the tires. "Start cutting, and don't lose a finger. I need all 10 of them for the weeding later." Julian turned on the saw. The noise was deafening, vibrating through his arms, shaking his bones. He attacked the tire. It smelled like burning rubber. It was hard, resistant, and messy. But as he fought with the stubborn rubber, Maya's words echoed in his head. "We take things the world threw away, and we heal them." He thought about himself. He wasn't thrown away. He was on the cover of Forbes. But was he whole? He felt fractured. He felt like a shiny, expensive plastic pot that was empty inside. Here, covered in rubber dust, wrestling with garbage, he felt substantial. "You're doing it wrong again." Maya shouted over the noise of the saw. She stepped in behind him, her arms reaching around his to guide the blade. For a second, her chest pressed against his back. He could smell her shampoo, lavender, and something earthy. His heart did a traitorous double flip in his chest. "Let the tool do the work," she murmured near his ear. "Don't force it, just guide it." Julian stopped breathing. He wasn't sure if he was terrified of the saw or terrified of the fact that for the first time in his life he didn't want to be the one in control. "Okay," he choked out, guiding it. They worked for hours. By the end of the day, they had 3 ugly, magnificent tire planters and a bench made of pallets that sat slightly crooked. "It leans to the left," Julian observed, stepping back to admire their handiwork. "It adds character," Maya declared. She sat down on it, patting the space next to her. "Sit. Let's test the structural integrity." Julian sat. The bench groaned but held. They sat side by side, watching the evening commuters rush past the fence. People in suits, people on phones, people looking miserable. "They look like ants," Maya said softly, "rushing back to their hills." "They're just trying to survive," Julian said, feeling a pang of guilt. He was one of those ants. "Are they?" Maya asked. "Or are they just working to buy things they don't need to impress people they don't like?" Julian turned to look at her. The setting sun caught the dust motes dancing around her hair. "You really hate them, don't you, the corporate types?" Maya sighed, leaning her head back against the rough wood of the pallet. "I don't hate them, Jay. I pity them, and I fear them, because they look at a place like this. A place that feeds 50 families a week, a place where kids learn that carrots grow in dirt, not in plastic bags, and all they see is a line item. They see undeveloped asset." She turned to him, her brown eyes fierce. "There's a rumor," she whispered, as if saying it aloud made it more real. "That urban space is moving on the deed next week. If they buy the land, they'll bulldoze the squash beds first, then the greenhouse, then this bench." Julian felt like he had swallowed a stone. Next week. The acquisition meeting was next Tuesday. He knew because he had scheduled it. He was the one holding the bulldozer keys. Maybe. Julian started, his voice tight. Maybe you could talk to them. Maybe this Sterling guy isn't a total monster. Maya laughed, a harsh, dry sound. You're sweet, Jay, naive but sweet. Men like Julian Sterling don't talk to people like me, they don't hear us. The only language they speak is money, and that's the one language I don't have. She stood up, brushing splinters off her pants. Come on, I have a surprise for you, since you didn't cut your arm off today. The sky over Chicago turned a bruised purple, and the clouds opened up with the sudden violence of a Midwest summer storm. It started as a few fat drops, hitting the dry dust like bullets before turning into a deluge. Run! Maya shouted, grabbing Julian's hand. They sprinted through the garden, dodging puddles and leaping over pumpkin vines. The rain soaked them instantly, plastering Julian's cheap t-shirt to his chest and making Maya's curls spring into a wild halo. They reached the glass structure at the back of the lot, the greenhouse, and tumbled inside, slamming the door against the wind. The silence inside was sudden and heavy. The rain hammered against the glass roof, a deafening drum roll, but inside the air was warm, still, and thick with the scent of damp soil and blooming jasmine. Julian leaned against the door, gasping for breath. Water dripped from his nose. Maya was laughing, wiping rain from her eyes. We almost made it, she grinned. Almost, Julian wheezed. I think my shoes are now aquariums. I told you to wear boots, she teased. She walked over to a small workbench in the corner where a single lantern was flickering. She clicked it on, casting a warm, golden glow over the rows of delicate seedlings. It was intimate, too intimate. The world outside, the city, the traffic, the lies, was washed away by the rain. Here, inside the glass box, there was only the sound of water and the sound of their breathing. Maya picked up a towel from a hook and tossed it to him. Dry off. If you get pneumonia, I don't want to fill out the paperwork. Julian dried his hair, watching her. She moved around the greenhouse with a reverence he had never seen before. She touched the leaves of a fern gently, checking for pests. She adjusted a heat lamp over a tray of basil. This is the heart, she said softly, not looking at him. The garden outside is the body, but this is the heart. These are the babies. They're too weak to survive out there yet. She stopped in front of a glass jar sitting on the shelf. It was an old pickled jar, scrubbed clean. Inside, there was a pathetic collection of crumpled dollar bills and a handful of quarters. A piece of masking tape on the front read, Freedom Fund. Maya picked up the jar, swirling the coins around. The sound was thin and lonely. This is it, she said, her voice trembling slightly. 3 years of bake sales, 3 years of donations, 3 years of saving every penny I didn't spend on rent. How much is in there? Julian asked, stepping closer. $4,212, she recited instantly. Julian did the math in his head. That was less than he spent on a single dinner with clients. It was the price of the suit he had ruined on the first day. And how much do you need? He asked, dreading the answer. Maya put the jar down. She turned to face him, leaning back against the workbench. The golden light caught the unshed tears in her eyes. To buy the land outright, $2 million. To get a lawyer to file an injunction against the auction, $10,000. I'm not even halfway to a lawyer, Jay, and the auction is in 6 days. 6 days, the number hung in the humid air between them. I'm failing them, she whispered. My grandmother, the neighborhood kids, me. Julian asked, startled. You, she nodded. You've been working so hard. You built that bench. You fixed the irrigation. You're part of this now. And I'm going to let it all get taken away because I can't. I can't fight a billion-dollar empire with a pickled jar. Julian felt a physical pain in his chest, sharper than any heartbreak he had ever known. He wanted to reach into his pocket, pull out his black Amex, and say, done. It's yours. He wanted to call his legal team and have them crush the auction, but he couldn't. If he revealed who he was now, standing here in his wet clothes, having lied to her for weeks, she wouldn't see a savior. She would see the enemy. She would see the liar. She would throw him out, and she would never take his money. You're not failing, Julian said, his voice rough. He took a step toward her. The space between them vanished. He could feel the heat radiating from her skin. You're the only thing standing between this place and the concrete. That's not failure, that's heroism. Maya looked up at him. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, but finding only intensity. You're weird, Jay Sterlingson, she whispered. You show up out of nowhere, you don't know how to hold a shovel, you wear Italian loafers to a garden, and sometimes you say the perfect thing. The rain pounded harder on the roof, isolating them in a cocoon of sound. Julian looked at her lips. They were chapped, pink, and slightly parted. I'm not a hero, she said, her voice dropping to a hush. I'm just tired. Then let someone else carry it for a minute, Julian said. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. He wanted to tuck a damp curl behind her ear. He wanted to tell her that he could stop the rain. Maya didn't pull away. She leaned in just an inch, her breath hitched. Jay. The moment was magnetic. It was inevitable. Julian leaned down. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound came from the pocket of his wet pants, not the locked drawer. He had forgotten to leave his phone in the shed today because of the rain. The spell shattered like glass. Maya jumped back, her eyes wide. Julian cursed internally, a string of profanities that would have made a sailor blush. He pulled the phone out. The screen was bright in the dim light. Incoming call, Chloe Vance Influencer Relations. Maya stared at the screen. She read the name. Chloe Vance, she asked, her brow furrowing. The TikTok girl, the one who does those poverty tourism videos. Julian froze. Why is Chloe Vance calling a guy who is doing community service for digital piracy? Maya's voice was hardening. The softness was evaporating, replaced by the suspicion he had seen on day one. She's my cousin. Julian lied, the words tasting like ash. She's annoying. Family, you know. Maya stared at him for a long moment. The rain seemed to get louder, colder. Right, she said finally, stepping away from him. Family. She picked up the pickle jar and shoved it into a drawer, hiding it from view. The rain is letting up, she said, her voice flat. You should go, Jay. Your shift ended 10 minutes ago. I don't want you to work for free. Maya, wait. Go, she said, turning her back to him to fiddle with a watering can. I have numbers to crunch and a miracle to find. Julian stood there for a moment, watching her back. He had never felt more powerless in his life. He turned and walked out into the drizzle, the phone still buzzing in his hand like a bomb waiting to go off. He had 6 days. 6 days to save the garden, save the girl, and somehow stop being the villain in his own story. Peace in the 4th Street garden was a fragile ecosystem. It relied on the hum of bees, the distant rumble of the L train, and the unspoken agreement that this was a sanctuary. On Tuesday morning, that peace was shattered by the clicking of 4-inch stilettos on gravel and a voice that sounded like it had been auto-tuned for maximum annoyance. Okay, guys, so we are here in the trenches today. Literally, look at this aesthetic, it's giving. Urban decay chic, it's giving. Post-apocalyptic cottagecore. Julian, who was knees deep in a bed of carrots, froze. He knew that voice. He had heard it at galas. He had heard it in boardrooms where influencers were pitched as high-value assets. It was Chloe Vance, lifestyle guru, professional victim, and the woman who had called his phone in the greenhouse yesterday. He pulled the brim of his dirty baseball cap lower. He smeared a streak of mud across his cheekbone for good measure. If Chloe Vance recognized him here, shoveling manure, the internet wouldn't just break. It would combust. Maya emerged from the tool shed. She wasn't wearing her usual smile. She was holding a pitchfork and her knuckles were white. Can I help you? Maya asked, stepping into the path of Chloe and her cameraman, a bored-looking guy holding a rig that cost more than the entire garden. Chloe didn't look at Maya. She looked at the lens of her phone, adjusting her ring light attachment. Oh, hi, are you like the caretaker? Chloe asked, finally glancing at Maya with a look of polite disgust. I'm Chloe Vance. You probably follow me. I'm doing a segment on dangerous places in the city and how we need to clean them up for safety. My followers are obsessed with urban renewal. This isn't a dangerous place, Maya said, her voice tight. It's a community garden and you're trespassing. We have a no filming policy without prior consent. Chloe laughed. It was a tinkling, empty sound. Consent, sweetie. It's a public space. And honestly, looking at that. She pointed a manicured finger at the compost pile Julian was hiding behind. That is a health hazard. I mean, do you even have a permit for that smell? It smells like poverty and tetanus. The cameraman swung the lens toward the compost, toward Julian. Julian ducked. Stop filming, Maya demanded, stepping forward. She raised a hand to block the lens. Whoa, assault, Chloe shrieked, jumping back as if Maya had brandished a knife. Did you guys see that? She literally attacked me. This is exactly what I'm talking about. These places attract unstable elements. We need to shut this down for the safety of the neighborhood. Chloe turned back to her phone, her face shifting instantly into a mask of concern. Guys, I am literally shaking. This is why we need urban space to come in and build those condos. Safety first, right? Hashtag clean up the streets. Maya looked ready to explode. She was shaking, not from fear, but from the impotent rage of someone watching their life's work be reduced to a soundbite for a stranger's vanity. She opened her mouth to shout, to scream, to give Chloe exactly the angry local footage she wanted. Actually, a deep voice cut through the air. It's hashtag defamation per se. Julian stood up. He didn't look like Julian Sterling. He was covered in dirt, wearing baggy cargo pants and a hat pulled low. But he didn't sound like Jay the Pirate. He sounded like the man who billed $1,500 an hour for legal consultation. He walked over to them, stepping between Maya and the camera. He didn't shout. He didn't wave his arms. He stood with the absolute, terrifying stillness of a predator. You're filming on private property, Julian said calmly. The 4th Street Garden is a registered 501c3 non-profit organization holding a lease on this land. It is not public property. Chloe blinked, her fake eyelashes fluttering. Excuse me, who are you, the gardener? I'm a witness, Julian said. And I'm witnessing you violate Illinois Statute 720 regarding criminal trespass. Furthermore, by broadcasting a claim that this location is a health hazard without citations from the health department, you are engaging in slander of title and tortious interference with business operations. He took a step closer. The cameraman lowered his rig, looking nervous. If you post that video, Julian continued, his voice dropping an octave, this organization can sue you for damages. Not just for the loss of donations, but for the distress caused to the staff. And unlike you, I doubt they settle out of court. He pointed to the red record light on the camera. Delete the footage, or I call the police and we file a report right now. And I promise you a mugshot doesn't fit your aesthetic. Chloe stared at him. She looked from his muddy boots to his shadowed face. She didn't recognize him. She couldn't process that a man dressed like that was speaking to her like that. It was a cognitive dissonance she wasn't equipped to handle. Whatever, she scoffed, rolling her eyes. This place is boring anyway. Let's go, Kyle. The lighting here is unflattering. She turned on her heel, spinning around. By gardeners, good luck with the dirt. She marched out, Kyle trailing behind her. The gate slammed shut. Silence returned to the garden. Julian let out a breath, his shoulders slumping. He adjusted his hat, terrified that he had gone too far, that he had slipped too much into Sterling mode. He turned to look at Maya. She was staring at him. Her mouth was slightly open. She looked at him like she had never seen him before. Statute 720, she asked slowly. Tortious interference. Julian rubbed the back of his neck, forcing a sheepish grin. I watch a lot of legal dramas, you know, Suits, Law and Order. It's amazing what you pick up when you're bored. You sounded like a lawyer, Jay, she said, narrowing her eyes. You stood like a lawyer, I was channeling my inner Harvey Specter, he lied, praying she wouldn't push it. Did it work? Maya looked at the gate where Chloe had disappeared. Then she looked back at him. A slow smile spread across her face. It wasn't the polite smile she gave volunteers. It was a grin of pure conspiratorial delight. It worked, she laughed. You terrified her. I think she almost broke a heel running away. She walked over to him and punched him lightly on the arm. Thanks, Jay. Seriously, I was about to hit her with the pitchfork. You probably saved me a felony charge. Anytime, Julian said, his heart hammering against his ribs. But maybe keep the pitchfork handy just in case. Maya sighed, her smile fading as she looked around the garden. She's right about one thing, though. The wolves are circling. First the influencers, then the developers. The auction is in 4 days. Julian looked at the determined set of her jaw. He looked at the fragile plant she was trying to protect. He knew something she didn't. The wolves weren't coming in 4 days. The wolf was already inside the gate, and he was currently wearing a muddy baseball cap. The air in the urban space boardroom was scrubbed clean. It smelled of nothing. No earth, no rain, no tomatoes. Just ionized air and money. Julian Sterling sat at the head of the long glass table. It was Friday, 3 days before the public auction was scheduled to begin. But in the world of high-stakes real estate, things rarely happened in public. The real deals happened here in the silence before the gavel ever banged. The 4th Street lot, Julian said. He didn't look at the board of directors. He looked at his reflection in the polished glass of the table. He looked tired. His tan was uneven, darker on the back of his neck from bending over garden beds. It's a go, said Marcus, the CFO, a man who thought empathy was a weakness and profit was a religion. We have the demolition permits pre-approved. We can have bulldozers on site by Wednesday morning. The projection for the luxury units is astronomical. Gentrification is moving west faster than we anticipated. Wednesday morning, Julian closed his eyes. He saw Maya. He saw her hands covered in dirt. He saw the Freedom Fund jar with its pathetic $4,000. He saw the way she looked at the seedlings like they were her children. If he did nothing, Urban Space would buy the lot on Monday. On Wednesday, they would crush the greenhouse. They would crush Maya. I want to secure the asset early, Julian said, opening his eyes. Sir, Marcus asked. The auction is Monday. We're the only major bidder. We can get it for a steal, maybe 500,000. No, Julian said sharply. I don't want to risk a bidding war. I don't want bad press about us fighting a non-profit. I want it done quietly, today. He slid a folder across the table. I've set up a holding company, J. Sterling Holdings. We offer the city $2 million for the deed. Cash, immediate transfer. They'll take it. The city is broke. They won't wait for an auction if we offer 4 times the value. The room went silent. Marcus blinked. 2 million, Julian, that's insane. It's a patch of dirt in a D-list neighborhood. The ROI will take 10 years to recover. I don't care about the ROI, Julian snapped. The mask of the cool, detached CEO slipped for a fraction of a second. I want that land secure. I want to know that no one else can touch it. Marcus looked at him, confused. Secure? We're going to pave it, Julian. Who cares if... Just do it, Julian ordered. He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. It felt like armor. It felt like a straitjacket. Buy it, today. Send the deed to my private office. Do not, I repeat, do not send a demolition crew. I will handle the transition personally. You want to handle the eviction of a community garden personally? Marcus asked, skeptical. Since when do you do the dirty work? Since now, Julian said. He walked out of the boardroom. He didn't wait for their agreement. He was the king, and kings didn't ask. He went back to his office, a corner suite with a view of the entire city. He walked to the window and looked west. He couldn't see the garden from here. It was too small, too insignificant against the skyline, but he knew it was there. He pulled out his phone, the personal one. He typed a text to Maya, Hey, don't worry about the auction. I have a feeling things are going to work out. He hovered his thumb over the send button. Then he deleted it. He couldn't tell her yet, not like this. He had a plan, a perfect white knight plan. He would buy the land, he would own it, and then he would gift it to her or lease it to her for $1 a year. He would swoop in, reveal his identity, and say, "Look, I'm not the monster. I used my power to save you." She would be angry about the lie at first, sure. But then she would see the deed. She would see that the garden was safe forever. She would forgive him. They would kiss in the greenhouse, and the rain would fall, and it would be perfect. It was a transaction. He was buying her safety. He was buying her happiness. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Greg." "Yes, Mr. Sterling." "Get the legal team to draft a transfer of ownership from J. Sterling Holdings to Maya Lynn, the gardener lady," Greg asked, his voice squeaking. "Yes, Greg, the gardener lady. Have it ready by Monday." "Yes, sir." Julian leaned back in his leather chair. He let out a long sigh of relief. He had done it. He had solved the problem. He had used his money, his power, his influence, and he had used it for good. He felt virtuous. He felt like a hero. He checked his watch. It was 1:00 p.m. Time to change. Time to go back to the garden and shovel mulch, knowing that he was secretly the king who had just saved the kingdom. He didn't realize as he loosened his tie that he hadn't saved anything. He had just bought the one thing Maya valued more than the land itself, her fight. He had stolen her agency. He had turned her crusade into his charity project. And when she found out, she wasn't going to kiss him. She was going to burn the kingdom down. Monday morning arrived with the heavy, suffocating humidity that only Chicago could produce. The air felt solid, pressing against the lungs, a physical weight that matched the mood inside the 4th Street garden. Maya was sitting on the crooked pallet bench Julian had built. She wasn't gardening. She wasn't weeding. She was just sitting, staring at a single sheet of cream-colored paper trembling in her hands. Julian walked in through the gate at exactly 1:35 p.m. He was practically vibrating with nervous energy. In his back pocket, folded neatly inside a plastic bag to protect it from the sweat and dirt, was a transfer of deed. He had done it. The transaction had cleared at 9:00 a.m. J. Sterling Holdings now owned the land. The wolves were gone. He was the wolf, and he had decided to become a vegetarian. He walked over to her, a suppressed grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. He expected to see her frantic, preparing for the auction. Instead, she looked like a statue. "Hey," Julian said, trying to sound casual like Jay the pirate gardener. "Why so quiet? We have peppers to harvest, and I think I'm finally ready to use the weed whacker without cutting my own foot off." Maya didn't look up. She didn't smile. She just held out the paper. "It's over," she whispered. Her voice was hollow, scraped clean of all the fire that usually defined her. Julian frowned. "What's over?" "The auction. It's canceled." Julian's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment of relief. Canceled, that's good news, right? That means they gave up. "No, Jay. It means someone bought it before it even hit the block." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were red, rimmed with dark circles. She looked defeated in a way that terrified him. "A private sale," she continued, her voice trembling. "The city sold us out this morning. Cash offer, $2 million. They didn't even give us a chance to counter. It's gone." Julian sat down next to her, the wood groaning under his weight. He felt a sudden, frantic urge to pull the deed out of his pocket and wave it in her face. "No, look, it's me. I bought it for you," but he couldn't. Not yet. He had to play the part. He had to ease her into it. "Who bought it?" he asked, feigning ignorance. Maya looked at the paper again, spitting the name out like poison. J. Sterling Holdings, a shell company, but we all know who's behind it. It's him. It's Julian Sterling. She crumpled the paper in her fist. "He didn't just beat us, Jay. He erased us. He bought the ground out from under our feet while we were sleeping. He probably signed the check while eating a $300 omelet." Julian winced. He had, in fact, been eating an egg white frittata when he authorized the wire transfer. "Maya, listen," Julian started, leaning forward. Maybe it's not the end. Maybe this Sterling guy isn't planning to bulldoze it. Maybe he bought it too. Preserve it. Maya laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. Preserve it. Men like that don't preserve things, they extract value. He sees this garden and sees a tax write-off or a condo tower. He doesn't see the food pantry we support. He doesn't see the kids. She stood up abruptly, pacing the gravel path. I failed, she said, her voice cracking. I promised my grandmother I would hold the line, and I let a billionaire walk right through me. You didn't fail, Julian insisted, standing up to catch her arm. Maya, look at me. What if? What if you found out that the buyer was on your side? On my side? She pulled her arm away, her eyes flashing with anger. He's not on my side. He's the enemy. He owns me now, Jay. Do you understand what that feels like? To be a tenant on your own dream. To wait for the eviction notice from a man who has never even stepped foot in this neighborhood. The irony tasted like bile in Julian's throat. I am standing right here, he wanted to scream. I am stepping in the neighborhood right now. I just have a feeling, Julian said weakly, that things might be different this time. You have a feeling, she scoffed, wiping a tear from her cheek. Well, unless your feeling comes with $2 million and a time machine, it's useless. She turned away from him, looking at the greenhouse. I need to start packing, she whispered. I need to figure out how to move 300 tomato plants before the bulldozers come. Julian stood there, his hand hovering over his back pocket. The deed felt heavy, burning against his skin. He had the solution. He had the happy ending right there in his hand. But looking at her back, rigid with grief and pride, he suddenly realized that the happy ending wasn't going to be as simple as handing over a piece of paper. He had underestimated her pride, and he had vastly overestimated his own charm. Tuesday was worse. The eviction notice hadn't come yet, but the dread had settled over the garden like a thick fog. Maya was manic, moving from bed to bed, tagging plants to be saved, making calls to other community centers to see if they could take the chickens. Julian, still Jay, was trying to help, but he felt like an intruder at a funeral he had caused. Around 3:00 p.m., the atmosphere shifted. It started with a text message on Maya's phone, which was sitting on the potting bench playing lo-fi music. Then another. Then a continuous rapid-fire vibration that buzzed against the wood like an angry hornet. Maya wiped her dirty hands on her overalls and picked it up. Who is blowing up my phone? She muttered. She unlocked the screen. She frowned. She tapped an app. Julian was busy coiling a hose a few feet away. He was rehearsing his speech. Maya, sit down. I have something crazy to tell you. I won the lottery. I bought the land. It was a lie on top of a lie, but it was better than the truth. Jay, Maya said. Her voice was different. It wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was confused and cold. Julian turned around. Yeah, Maya was holding the phone up, staring at him, then at the screen, then back at him. Her face was pale, the blood draining away so fast it left her looking waxen. Come here, she said. Julian walked over, wiping his hands on his pants. What's wrong? Is it the city? Look, she said, shoving the phone into his face. It was a TikTok video. It had 2 million views. The thumbnail was a blurry, zoomed-in shot of a man's face covered in mud, wearing a baseball cap. The caption read, "The Billionaire in the Mud. Julian Sterling, undercover boss exposed." Julian felt the world tilt on its axis. He watched the video. It was from Chloe Vance's visit. The camera shook as it zoomed in on Jay lecturing her about Statute 720. You're filming on private property. The voice on the video said. It was deep, authoritative, and unmistakably the voice of a CEO. Then the video cut to a split screen. On the left, Jay in the garden. On the right, Julian Sterling giving a keynote speech at a tech summit 2 months ago. The voiceover, some internet sleuth with a high-pitched voice, narrated the evidence. Okay, TikTok, look at this. The jawline, identical, the voice. A 99% match, and look at the watch peeking out from under his glove. That is a Patek Philippe Nautilus. Retail price, $120,000. Who wears a house on their wrist to shovel manure? I'll tell you who, Julian Sterling, the guy who just bought that exact plot of land. The video ended. It looped. Julian stood there frozen. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't speak. He stared at the tiny screen where his two lives had just collided with the force of a train wreck. He looked up at Maya. She wasn't looking at the phone anymore. She was looking at him. She was studying his face, peeling away the dirt, the hat, the messy hair, and seeing the man beneath. "Apodec Philippe," she whispered. She grabbed his wrist, the one he had carefully kept covered with a thick work glove for weeks. She yanked the glove off. There it was, the steel and blue dial glinting in the afternoon sun. He had forgotten to take it off on the first day, and then he had just kept hiding it. Julian started, his voice failing him. "You," Maya said. She stepped back as if he were radioactive. "It's you." "Maya, please let me explain. It's you," she shouted, the sound ripping through the garden. "You're him. You're Julian Sterling." "Yes," he admitted, dropping his hands to his sides. "I am." Maya stared at him, her chest heaving. She looked like she was trying to reconcile the image of Jay, the guy who ate tomato sandwiches and couldn't use a shovel, with the monster she had hated for years. "Why?" she asked. Her voice broke. "Was this a game? Was this some kind of poverty tourism for you? Did you and your rich friends bet on how long you could fool the poor girl?" "No," Julian stepped forward. "God, no, it wasn't a game. I came here by accident. I was running away from my life. And then I met you, and I stayed because this place felt real, because you felt real. Real." Maya laughed, and this time there were tears streaming down her face. "You talk about real. You've been lying to my face for 3 weeks, every word, every moment. You let me teach you how to save money on fertilizer while you had billions in the bank. You let me cry to you about losing the land while you were the one buying it." She stopped, a horrifying realization washing over her. "You bought it," she whispered. "The holding company, J. Sterling, it was you." "I bought it for you," Julian blurted out. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out the plastic bag. He ripped it open, his hands shaking, and held out the deed. "Look, I bought it to save it. I bought it so no one else could touch it. I was going to give it to you. Look, Maya, it's a transfer of deed to you, to Maya Lin." He held the paper out like a shield, like an offering. Maya looked at the paper. She saw her name typed in legal font next to his. She didn't take it. She didn't smile. She looked at him with a mixture of heartbreak and absolute fury that froze Julian's blood. The paper fluttered between them in the slight breeze, a $1 million gift that no one wanted. "You bought it for me," I repeated slowly. "Yes," Julian said, breathless, thinking he saw a glimmer of hope. "I secured the asset. I stopped the auction. It's yours, Maya, forever. You don't have to fight anymore. You won." "I didn't win," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "You won. You just decided to let me hold the trophy. What does that matter? The garden is safe. That's what you wanted." "That's not what I wanted," she screamed, slapping the paper out of his hand. It fell into the dirt, landing on the toe of his boot. "I wanted to save it, me, us, the community. I wanted to earn it. I wanted to fight the system and win." She jabbed a finger into his chest, hard. "You stole that from me. You swooped in with your checkbook and your God complex, and you decided that I was a problem to be fixed with money. I was trying to help." Julian shouted back, his own frustration boiling over. "I have the means. Why should you struggle for 10 years to raise money that I make in 10 minutes? That's inefficient." "Because the struggle is the point," Maya yelled. "The struggle is what makes it ours. If you buy it, it's still yours, Julian. Even if you put my name on the deed, it's charity, it's a handout. I become just another tax write-off for Julian Sterling's conscience." She stepped back, wiping her face furiously. "You sat on that bench," she said, her voice trembling. "You sat there and listened to me talk about how much I hated men like you. How much I hated the way you stripped the dignity out of everything. And you said nothing. You just watched, like I was a TV show. I was afraid," Julian admitted, his voice cracking. "I was afraid that if I told you who I was, you would look at me the way you're looking at me right now." "Well," Maya said, her eyes cold and hard as flint. "Congratulations. Your fear came true." She pointed to the gate. "Get out." Maya, be reasonable. The deed is right there. Just pick it up. Just take it. Get out. I'm not leaving until you take the land. You are trespassing, she said, on private property, and since you're the owner, I guess I can't call the cops. But I can tell you this, if you don't leave, I will burn this garden down myself. Julian stared at her. He saw the wild, desperate look in her eyes. She meant it. She would rather destroy her dream than accept it from a liar. He realized then that he hadn't just broken her trust. He had broken the fundamental thing that made her Maya. He had tried to buy a wild thing, thinking he was saving it, only to realize that cages made of gold were still cages. He stooped down and picked up the deed. It was smudged with dirt now. I'll go, he said quietly. He looked at the tomato plants he had watered. He looked at the tire planters he had cut. He looked at the woman he had fallen in love with in the span of 3 weeks. But I'm keeping the promise, he said. No bulldozers, not while I'm breathing. I don't believe you, Maya said. I don't believe a word that comes out of your mouth. Julian nodded slowly. He deserved that. He turned and walked toward the gate. He didn't look back. He walked out of the garden, past the crooked sign, and onto the concrete sidewalk. He walked 3 blocks until he found a spot where his cell phone had signal. He dialed Greg. Greg, he said, his voice sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a well. Send the car. I'm ready to come back to the office. Sir, is everything okay? Julian looked down at his dirty clothes, his muddy Patek Philippe, and the paper in his hand that was worth $2 million and absolutely nothing. No, Greg, he said. Nothing is okay. The penthouse office of Urban Space was located on the 45th floor. It was a masterpiece of modern design, floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian marble floors, and a desk that cost more than most people earned in a year. It was silent. It was clean. It was dead. Julian Sterling sat in his leather chair, staring out at the city. He had been back for 3 days. 3 days of wearing 3-piece suits. 3 days of drinking filtered water instead of lukewarm hose water. 3 days of being the shark again. He felt like he was suffocating. On his desk, amidst the perfectly organized stacks of contracts and financial reports, sat a small, ugly object. It was a dried lump of gray clay he had scraped off his boot. He hadn't wiped it away. He kept staring at it like it was a holy relic. Sir, Julian didn't turn. What is it, Greg? Greg stood in the doorway, looking terrified. The board is asking for the demolition schedule for the 4th Street property. They want to know why the bulldozers haven't been deployed. Marcus is agitated. Tell Marcus to wait, Julian said flatly. He says we're losing $50,000 a day in potential development time. Tell him if he calls me one more time, I'll turn his office into a daycare center. Greg swallowed audibly. Yes, sir. He left, closing the heavy oak door. Julian sighed and spun his chair around. He picked up the transfer deed, the one Maya had slapped out of his hand. It was wrinkled and stained with soil. He had everything. Money, power, the land, and he had absolutely nothing. Late that night, long after the staff had gone home, Julian was still there, loosening his tie and staring at the ceiling. The office door creaked open. It wasn't Greg. It was Elias, the night janitor. Elias was 60 years old, with a back bent from years of labor and eyes that saw everything. He pushed his cart into the room, humming a tune. You're still here, Mr. Sterling? Elias asked, pausing his mop bucket. You know, rich folks usually go home early on Fridays. I have work to do, Elias, Julian muttered. Doesn't look like work, Elias observed, leaning on his mop. Looks like brooding. My grandson broods like that when a girl breaks his heart. Julian let out a dry, humorless laugh. Is it that obvious? You're wearing a $4,000 suit, but you look like you got kicked by a mule, so yeah, obvious. Julian looked at Elias. He looked at the man's rough hands that worked for a living just like Maya's. Elias, Julian asked suddenly, if you broke something valuable, how would you fix it? Depends, Elias said, scratching his chin. Is it glass or is it trust? Julian flinched. Trust. Elias nodded slowly. Ah, that's the tricky one. See, if I break a window, I can buy a new pane, put it in. Good as new, but trust. Trust is like a plant, Mr. Sterling. It grows slow. You can't just yell at it to grow faster, and you can't just glue the leaves back on once you rip them off. I tried to buy it back, Julian admitted, looking at the deed. I tried to fix the problem with a check. Elias chuckled, shaking his head. That's your problem right there. You think the checkbook is a magic wand, but you can't garden with a checkbook, son. You need to get your hands dirty. You need to do the work. And sometimes doing the work means giving up the control. Giving up control. The words echoed in the empty office. Julian looked at the deed. J. Sterling Holdings. He still owned it. Even if he gave it to her, he was the benefactor. He was the god above, bestowing gifts. That was why she hated it, because as long as he gave it to her, he could take it away. Julian sat up straight. The fog in his brain suddenly cleared. Elias, Julian said, grabbing his pen, you're a genius. I'm just a janitor, Mr. Sterling. I just know that you can't mop a floor if you don't wring out the dirty water first. Julian was already dialing his phone. He dialed his personal lawyer, a man named Saul who charged by the minute and slept even less than Julian. Saul, Julian said, his voice crisp and alive for the first time in days. Wake up. We have work to do. I need you to draft a new trust structure. No, not for me, for the 4th Street neighborhood. Julian, it's 11:00 p.m., Saul's groggy voice complained. Are you drunk? I'm sober, Saul. Listen to me carefully. I want to dissolve J. Sterling Holdings. I want to transfer the asset into a community land trust. Irrevocable, managed by a board of local residents. You're giving away a $2 million asset, Saul asked, incredulous. Without a tax benefit, Julian, that's financial suicide. No, Julian said, looking at the lump of clay on his desk. It's remediation. I'm fixing the soil, Saul. Now start drafting. I need the papers by morning. Saturday morning at the 4th Street Garden was usually a time of harvest. Today it was a time of mourning. Maya was on her knees in the tomato bed pulling up stakes. She wasn't crying anymore. She was past tears. She was in the cold, numb phase of grief where you just do what needs to be done. She had decided to move the plants to a small plot behind the local elementary school. It wasn't enough space, but it was something. Careful with the roots, she told a volunteer, a teenager named Leo. They are in shock. Like us, Leo muttered. The gate creaked open. The sound was sharp in the quiet morning. Maya didn't look up. She assumed it was another volunteer or maybe the eviction crew coming to post the official notice. Maya, she froze, her hands clenched around the tomato vine, crushing a leaf. The sharp scent of green tomato filled the air. She knew that voice. She knew it as Jay, the clumsy gardener, and she knew it as Julian Sterling, the liar. She stood up slowly, dusting off her knees. She turned around. Julian was standing at the gate. He wasn't wearing his disguise. He was wearing a simple button-down shirt and jeans, clean, well-fitted, but humble. He wasn't hiding behind a baseball cap. He was just there. He was holding a thick manila envelope. I told you, Maya said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage, that if you came back, I would burn this place down. I remember, Julian said. He didn't step inside. He stayed on the sidewalk, respecting the boundary she had drawn. And I'm not crossing the line. I just came to deliver this. I don't want your deed, Julian. I don't want your charity. It's not a deed, Julian said. And it's not charity, it's a surrender. He placed the envelope on the ground just inside the gate. Then he stepped back, giving her space. What is it? She asked, eyeing the envelope like it was a bomb. It's the charter for the 4th Street Community Land Trust, Julian explained, his voice steady but soft. I dissolved the holding company this morning. The land doesn't belong to J. Sterling anymore, and it doesn't belong to you either. Maya frowned, confused. What? It belongs to the trust, Julian continued. The trust is governed by a board of 5 directors. The charter names the initial board members. the principal of the elementary school, the pastor of the local church, 2 resident representatives. And you. Maya stared at him. She took a hesitant step toward the envelope. I removed myself completely, Julian said. I have no voting rights. I have no ownership. I can't sell it. I can't bulldoze it. I can't take it back. Even if I wanted to, I can't touch it. It belongs to the neighborhood, legally, irrevocably, forever. Maya stopped. She looked at the envelope, then at him. You gave it away. I gave it back, Julian corrected. I realized you were right. If I gave it to you, it would always be my gift. It would be about my power. But this is about your power. You and the board decide what happens. If you want to build a greenhouse, you build it. If you want to ban me from the property forever, you can vote to do that. He offered a small, sad smile. I gave you the weapon, Maya. You can use it to save the garden, and you can use it to keep me out. Maya walked over to the envelope. She picked it up. It was heavy. She opened the flap and pulled out the document. She scanned the legal jargon. Irrevocable trust, board of directors, purpose, community agriculture and education. It was real. He hadn't just bought the land, he had dismantled his own ownership of it. He had legally cut off his own hand so he couldn't control her. She looked up at him. The anger that had been fueling her for days suddenly had nowhere to go. It didn't vanish, but it softened, turning into a confusing ache in her chest. Why? She asked quietly. Why go to all this trouble? You could have just sold it to another developer and walked away with a profit. Because of the tomatoes, Julian said. The tomatoes, the Cherokee purples. He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. And the pallet bench. And the way you looked at me when I finally learned how to use a shovel. You showed me that I was living a life that was shiny but empty. You showed me that things with scars have better stories. He took a deep breath, shoving his hands into his pockets. I can't undo the lie, Maya. I know that. I can't unbreak the trust, but I can fix the soil. This. He gestured to the papers. This is me adding the compost. It's me trying to make the ground fertile again. Whether anything grows from it, that's up to you. He waited. He waited for her to yell or to cry or to tell him it wasn't enough. Maya held the papers against her chest. She looked at the garden, safe. Truly, actually safe, not because a billionaire allowed it, but because it belonged to them now. You're right, she said finally. Her voice was firm. This doesn't fix us. You lied to me, Julian. You made me feel like a fool. I know. But, she continued, you also saved this place, and you did it the right way, the hard way. She took a step closer to the gate. The board has a meeting next Tuesday, she said, to discuss garden maintenance and volunteer schedules. Julian waited, holding his breath. We're short on labor, Maya said, a hint of the old spark returning to her eyes. We need someone to turn the compost pile. It's a dirty job, unpaid, and the supervisor is extremely strict. Julian felt his heart restart. I have experience with strict supervisors, and I have my own gloves now. Don't wear the Italian loafers, she warned. I burned them, he lied. Good. Maya looked down at the papers, then back at him. She didn't smile, not fully. She wasn't ready to forgive him completely, but the gate between them, it wasn't locked anymore. See you Tuesday, Jay, she whispered. See you Tuesday, boss, Julian replied. He turned and walked away down the street. He didn't get into a limo. He walked to the subway station. He had a meeting with his own board of directors in an hour to explain why he had given away a $2 million asset. He was probably going to get fired. He smiled. He had never felt richer in his life. Tuesday became the anchor of Julian Sterling's week. For the rest of the world, Tuesday was just a day between Monday and Wednesday. But for the employees of Urban Space, Tuesday was the day the CEO disappeared at 1:00 p.m. sharp, no matter what crisis was burning. He's doing field research, Greg would tell the confused investors. The truth was far less corporate. Julian was standing in a pile of mulch, sweating through a t-shirt that cost $12. It had been 4 weeks since he surrendered the deed. 4 weeks of showing up. 4 weeks of keeping his mouth shut during board meetings when the neighborhood committee argued about whether to plant kale or chard. He had no vote, he had no power, and strangely, he had never felt more essential. "You're digging too deep again," a voice called out. Julian straightened up, wiping his forehead with a dirty forearm. Maya was standing over him, holding a tray of seedlings. She wasn't smiling, but the cold, hard wall that had been between them was gone, replaced by a cautious, tentative fence. "I'm aerating the soil," Julian argued, leaning on his pitchfork. "I read a book about it. The Soul of Soil. Chapter 4 says deep aeration promotes root growth." Maya rolled her eyes, but there was a flicker of amusement in them. "You read a book, of course you did. You probably highlighted it and made a PowerPoint presentation about it." "I did make notes," Julian admitted, "but no PowerPoint, yet." Maya set the tray down on the pallet bench, the crooked one he had built, which was now reinforced with new nails. She sat down and patted the spot next to her. "Take a break, Jay. You look like you're about to pass out. And if you pass out, I have to fill out an incident report, and I hate paperwork." Julian sat. The distance between them on the bench was 6 inches. A month ago, it had felt like a canyon. Now it felt like a pause in a conversation. "So," Maya said, looking out at the rows of green that were thriving under the summer sun, "I heard a rumor." "Oh." Julian grabbed his water bottle, a battered metal one, not a plastic one. "Is it about the rogue squirrel stealing the strawberries? Because I have a plan for him. It involves a tiny eviction notice." "No," Maya laughed softly. "It's about urban space. I heard they launched a new initiative, Green Roofs for All, retrofitting all your luxury buildings with community gardens open to the public." Julian shrugged, trying to look casual. It seemed like a good use of square footage, better than helicopter pads. "And I heard," she continued, turning to look at him, "that the CEO took a pay cut to fund the initial construction." Julian looked down at his muddy boots. The CEO was overpaid. He realized he didn't need a third yacht. He doesn't even like boats. He gets seasick. Maya was quiet for a long moment. The sounds of the city hummed around them, the sirens, the traffic, but in the garden the bees were louder. "You're changing things," she said softly. "Real things, not just on paper." "I'm trying," Julian said. He looked at her. The sun was catching the gold flecks in her brown eyes. "Elias told me that trust grows slow. I'm just trying to water it." Maya reached out. Her hand, rough with calluses and stained with chlorophyll, covered his. His hand was rougher now, too. The blisters had turned into tough skin. The Patek Philippe watch was gone, replaced by a simple digital Casio she had bought him as a joke, which he now wore religiously. "It's growing," she whispered. Julian turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. It was the first time they had touched like this since the rainstorm in the greenhouse. It felt electric. It felt terrifying. "Maya," he started, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't just want to be the volunteer. I don't want to be the guy who shows up on Tuesdays." "I know," she said. "I want the other days, too. I want the days when it rains. I want the days when the tomatoes die. I want the days when you're angry at the world. I want to be there for all of it." Maya looked at their joined hands. "You're a billionaire, Julian. You live in a glass tower. I live in a 4th-floor walk-up with a cat named Compost. We don't make sense." "We make sense here," Julian said, gesturing to the garden. "We make sense in the dirt, and I'm willing to learn how to make sense everywhere else, if you let me." Maya looked at him. She saw the man who had climbed a fence in a suit. She saw the man who had lied because he was lonely. She saw the man who had given away $2 million just to see her smile. "Okay," she said. "Okay, okay," she repeated, a smile breaking across her face like sunrise. "But we have to set some ground rules." "Anything." "Rule number 1," she counted on her fingers. "No secret identities. If you're stressed about a merger, you tell me. You don't pretend you're a pirate. Deal." "Rule number 2, no trying to fix my problems with your checkbook. If my car breaks down, you can help me change the tire, but you can't buy me a Tesla." Julian winced. That's going to be hard, but deal. And rule number 3, she leaned in closer, her eyes dancing. You have to kiss me right now, because I've been wanting to do this since you cut your pants on the fence. Julian didn't wait for a 4th rule. He leaned in, closing the 6-inch gap. The kiss didn't taste like champagne or expensive dinners. It tasted like sunlight and peppermint tea. It was messy and real and absolutely perfect. When they pulled apart, breathless, Julian rested his forehead against hers. I think, he whispered, that's my favorite rule. 6 months later, the Fall Harvest Festival was the biggest event of the year for the 4th Street Community Garden. The entire neighborhood showed up. There were tables groaning under the weight of squash, pumpkins, and late-season tomatoes. A local band was playing jazz in the corner near the tool shed. Julian Sterling was manning the grill. He was wearing an apron that said Grill Sergeant, a gift from Elias. He was flipping veggie burgers with the focus of a man closing a billion-dollar deal. You're burning the buns, Sterling. A voice chided. Julian looked up. Greg, his assistant, was standing there holding a paper plate. Greg looked different too. He wasn't wearing a tie. He looked relaxed. It's called char, Greg. It's a flavor profile. Look it up. Greg laughed. Right, hey, the mayor is here. She wants to talk to you about the urban renewal grant. Tell her I'm busy, Julian said, flipping a burger. I have a queue of hungry 3rd graders. Prioritize the stakeholders, Greg. Copy that, boss. Julian watched Greg walk away. He smiled. Life was busy. Urban space was currently undergoing a massive restructuring, pivoting towards sustainable housing. The stock price had dipped, then skyrocketed. It turned out people liked a company that actually cared about people. Hey, Grill Sergeant. Julian turned. Maya was there. She was wearing a dress today, a vintage floral print with combat boots. She looked radiant. She was holding a basket of the last Cherokee purple tomatoes of the season. How's business? She asked, stealing a pickle from his prep table. Booming. I think I've fed half of Chicago. How's the board meeting going? Good, she nodded. We voted to expand. We're going to take over the empty lot across the street next spring, and we voted on a new member. Julian raised an eyebrow. Oh, who's the lucky victim? You. Julian froze, his spatula hovering in midair. Me, but the charter says no conflict of interest. I'm the developer. The charter says community members, Maya corrected. And since you spend 4 days a week here and you practically live at my apartment, the board decided you qualify as a resident. She stepped closer, dodging the heat of the grill to wrap her arms around his waist. Plus, she whispered, the chairwoman is sleeping with the nominee, so there might have been some bias. Julian laughed, dropping the spatula to hug her back. He buried his face in her hair, smelling the familiar scent of lavender and earth. I accept the nomination, he said. Does it come with a parking spot? No, but it comes with unlimited tomato sandwiches. Julian looked over her shoulder at the garden. It was full of life. Kids were painting pumpkins. Old folks were playing chess on the pallet benches. It was a chaotic, messy, beautiful ecosystem. And right there on the front gate, below the hand-painted wooden sign, was a small, discreet bronze plaque, in partnership with the Community Land Trust, supported by J. Sterling. It wasn't a billboard. It wasn't an ad. It was just a footer, a quiet acknowledgement of the support structure underneath. You know, Julian said, pulling back to look at Maya. I used to think I built skyscrapers. I thought that was my legacy, steel and glass. And now? Meyer asked, tracing the line of his jaw. Julian looked at the dirt under his fingernails. He looked at the woman who had taught him how to breathe. Now, he said, kissing her nose, I think I'd rather build soil. Maya smiled. She picked up a tomato from her basket and took a bite, juice running down her chin. She didn't wipe it away. She just laughed, wild and free. Come on, Sterling, she said, grabbing his hand. Break's over. We have a lot of growing to do. And together, hand in hand, they walked back into the mess, into the work, into the beautiful, imperfect life they had grown from the ground up.